shouldn't be telling you this, but if you're ever in Shiprock at night, you need to listen carefully. This isn't one of those campfire stories people tell to scare tourists. This is the kind of thing you only hear when the sun's gone. The roads are empty, and the radio goes quiet for no reason. Out here, the dark feels heavier, like it's pressing down on your chest, like the land itself is awake and watching you move. You'll hear things you can't explain, voices that know your name, footsteps where no one should be, shapes that don't move right. Most people laugh this stuff off, until they're alone out here after midnight. The rules exist because something out there doesn't care if you believe in it or not. And before you ask how I know any of this, you need to understand who I am. Man, why I'm finally saying this out loud. Asterisk, I've worn this badge a long time. Long enough to know what people expect when they hear tribal police. They think it's quiet work, small town stuff, maybe a little paperwork, maybe breaking up a bar fight now and then. I used to think that too, back when I first rolled into Shiprock, fresh uniform, coffee in hand, thinking night shift was going to be boring. I'm Navajo, born into this land, raised with stories I half believed and half laughed off. And for years, I kept my mouth shut about what really happens out here after dark, because that's just how it's done. You don't talk about certain things. You don't put words to them. I've got years on patrol, miles of empty road behind me, and more nights I can't forget than I care to admit. I've responded to calls that vanished mid-sentence. I've backed up officers who wouldn't look me in the eye afterward. And I've seen things that never made it into any report. Things we all silently agreed to forget by morning. The reason I'm talking now isn't bravery, it's exhaustion. Carrying this stuff alone messes with your head. People deserve to know that when the sun goes down in Shiprock, the rules change. And before I can explain why those rules matter so damn much, you need to understand this one thing. First, Shiprock after dark is not normal. Asterisk once the sun drops behind the rock formations. Shiprock changes in a way that's hard to explain, unless you've felt it yourself. The daytime noise drains out of the land like someone pulled a plug. No wind, no bugs, even the dogs go quiet. It's the kind of silence that makes your ears ring, like the world is holding its breath. You can be driving for miles with your headlights cutting through the dark, and it feels like the road just keeps stretching, like it doesn't want you to reach the end. The land out here feels older at night, older and aware. The shadows don't sit still where they're supposed to. You'll catch shapes in the corner of your eye that disappear the second you look straight at them. Your radio will crackle for no reason, spitting out half words, breathing sometimes. What sounds like someone trying to talk but forgetting how. And there's this pressure, like being watched, not from one direction, but from everywhere at once. I've seen seasoned officers joke their way through the start of a night shift, laughing loud, acting tough. Give it a few hours out here, and they stop joking. Their shoulders tense up. They stop rolling their windows down. You don't linger outside your cruiser after dark in Shiprock, because standing still too long feels like an invitation. The land doesn't feel empty, it feels occupied. Locals know it. Elders know it. Even folks who don't believe in anything strange still rush to get home before the sky goes fully black. Whatever lives out here doesn't show itself outright. It waits, it listens, and it knows routines. That's why the nights feel wrong, not dangerous in an obvious way, but off. like reality is just a little crooked. That's when the older officers finally sit you down, lower their voices, and tell you the first thing you need to survive out here. The very first rule every new officer learns. Whether they believe it or not, asterisk, they don't hand you this rule in a manual, and nobody announces it during training. It comes late, usually after your first few night shifts, once they're sure. You felt that uneasy vibe for yourself. An older officer will pull you aside, real casual, like they're giving you advice about coffee or keeping your gas tank full. Then their tone changes. They tell you that after dark, if you see something standing on the road ahead of you, you don't stop unless it's clearly human, and even then, you make damn sure it stays human the whole time you're looking at it. At first, that sounds messed up. We're cops. Stopping to help people is the job. But out here, that instinct can get you killed. They'll tell you about figures that stand too still, faces you can't quite make out, silhouettes that don't move when your headlights hit. Them, if it doesn't react like a person shielding its eyes, stepping back, waving you down, you keep driving, no slowing, no rolling your window down, no second chances. What really messes with your head is how simple the rule is, compared to the fear behind it. Nobody explains exactly what happens if you break it. They just say things like, you don't want it to notice you, or once it knows you see it, it doesn't forget. That's when you realize this rule wasn't made out of superstition. It was made because someone learned the hard way. You start replaying every shadow, every shape you passed on the road, wondering if you did the right thing. And the scariest part, this rule isn't written down anywhere. None of them are. They're passed from mouth to mouth, officer to officer. Like secrets you're only trusted with once you've proven you'll listen. And that's when you learn. Something else real fast, the rules out here aren't official. And that makes them even more dangerous. Asterisk, what makes it worse is that none of this stuff is official. There's no binder, no memo, no line in the handbook that backs any of it up. You won't find these rules pinned to a corkboard or typed up in some dusty file. They live in conversations that happen in hushed voices, usually late at night. Usually when nobody else is around. You learn them the same way the people before you did, through warnings, half-finished sentences, and looks that tell you not to ask follow-up questions. Some of it comes from old stories passed down long before. There were patrol cars or radios. Other parts come from things that happened on the job, things that didn't fit cleanly into a report, incidents that got brushed off as equipment failure, exhaustion, or someone misreading the situation. Everyone pretends, that's all. It was, but you can feel the truth sitting there between the words. The fear is shared, even if nobody admits it out loud. You start to notice patterns. Officers who've been around a while all avoid the same roads at the same times. They all hesitate when certain calls come in. And when a new guy laughs it off, someone older will just shake their head and say, "You'll learn." That's the thing out here. Belief doesn't matter. The land doesn't care if you think it's superstition or nonsense. It only cares whether you follow the rules or not. The scariest part is realizing these rules evolve. Every now and then, a new one gets added, quietly, after something goes wrong. No announcement, no explanation. Just a subtle shift in how everyone operates. That's how you know something happened bad enough to change behavior. And once you accept that these unwritten rules exist, you start paying closer attention to the radio, to the dark outside your cruiser, to the sounds that don't make sense. Because one rule in particular gets hammered into you real fast. The one about what you should never, ever respond to when it calls out to you in the night. Asterisk, the second rule messes with you more than the first, because it goes straight after. Your instincts. After dark, if you hear someone calling out to you, you do not answer. Doesn't matter if it's over the radio, through the open window, or from somewhere out in the dark where there shouldn't be anyone standing. You don't say copy. You don't say hello. You don't even clear your throat. You keep your mouth shut and your eyes forward. Sometimes it's obvious. The radio crackles and you hear your name, but the voice is wrong too flat. Like it's being played back through bad speakers. Other times, it sounds perfect. Same tone, same cadence. Same way your partner says your name during roll call. That's the part that gets dangerous. Your brain wants to respond before you can stop yourself. And the older officers will tell you, dead serious, that the moment you answer, whatever it is, knows you're there. Not just your cruiser you. I've heard it happen when I was parked miles from the nearest house. I've heard it come from the desert itself, like the sound was riding the wind. Once, I heard my name whispered right behind my driver's side door. Soft and patient, like whoever said it knew I'd eventually turn my head. My hands were shaking so bad I had to dig my nails into the steering wheel just to stay still. Nobody explains exactly what happens if you respond. They don't need to. You can hear it in their voices when they warn you like they're remembering something they'd rather forget. The rule is simple. If it calls to you, it's not trying to help. It's trying to get permission. And if that wasn't bad enough, there's another version of this rule that hits even closer to home. Because sometimes the thing calling out to you doesn't sound strange at all. Sometimes it sounds like someone you know. Now, this next rule. It's the one that really gets under your skin because it messes with your head and your heart at the same time. Imagine driving down those empty roads at night and seeing someone you know, maybe a friend, a neighbor, hell, even a family member standing there in the shadows. Your first instinct is to pull over, call out, make sure they're okay. But out here, that's exactly what they want you to do, because sometimes it's not really them. It's something else wearing their face, their clothes, even copying the way they move and talk. Officers call it the mimic or the doppelganger. It's a damn nightmare, seeing someone you trust, someone you've known your whole life, but feeling that deep gut wrench that something's wrong. It's subtle at first, a blink too long without eye contact, a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes, a voice that's just a little off. But if you stop, if you get close enough to really look, it'll get bold. And bold out here doesn't mean friendly. I had a buddy who almost fell for it on his second night. He saw his cousin standing near the roadside, waving him down like everything was normal. He rolled his window down, said hey, and the look he got back was enough to freeze his blood. His cousin's eyes were completely black, and before he could slam the door shut, that thing lunged, vanishing into the night. He got out of that cruiser, shaken. Never talked about it, except in whispers later. That's why the rule is clear. If you think you see someone you know, keep driving. Don't stop to check. Don't flash your lights or roll your window down. You wait until you're far enough past before even looking again, and sometimes you don't look back at all. Because out here, The things that copy us don't just want to fool you, they want to replace you. And once you start doubting who's real, you're already too deep. Next, I'll tell you about the one rule that's all about when not to patrol alone. The hours that can break even the toughest cops. If they're not careful. Asterisk, there's a window of time out here that's like a curse. It's the hours when no one should be out alone, not even the toughest, most experienced officers. We call it the no man's hour, though no one says it out loud much. It starts around midnight and stretches until just before dawn. During those hours, the dark isn't just a backdrop. It feels alive, like the land itself is breathing and watching. You learn real quick that patrolling solo during that stretch isn't just risky, it's a damn invitation for trouble. The old-timers won't say why outright, but they'll drop hints, stories about officers who went out alone just to check a call or clear a road and never came back the same. Some never came back at all. You feel it too, an itch on the back of your neck, a heaviness in your chest that says, don't go. I've been on those night shifts, rolling through empty streets with nothing but the hum of the cruiser's engine and the crackle of static from the radio. But when the clock hits that witching hour, your senses sharpen and every shadow seems to twitch just out of sight. Your mind starts playing tricks, whispers carried on the wind, footsteps that don't match any living thing, lights flickering. Where no power's running, it's the kind of fear that gets under your skin, the silent kind that builds up until you're sweating, even though the air's freezing cold. That's why the rule is clear. Never patrol alone during those hours. If you're lucky, you've got a partner. If not, you call it in and wait it out, no matter how restless you feel. Because out here, being alone at night isn't just dangerous, it's deadly. And all these rules, this strange code of survival, they exist for one reason, because of what's happened before. The missing officers, the unexplained disappearances, the whispers no one dares share openly. I'll tell you about those stories next. Why these rules are more than just advice, and how they came to be. Asterisk, these rules didn't just pop up out of nowhere. They're the hard lessons learnt from real nightmares, officers who went missing or came back, changed in ways no one wanted to talk about. You hear the rumors, sure, but it's the stories whispered after the fact that really hit you. Like the guy who vanished on a routine patrol and was found days later, wandering miles off his route, muttering things that made no sense. Or the partner who came back with eyes so wide and empty, we all knew something followed him home but didn't leave. The department quietly covers these up, slapping labels like exhaustion or lost in the terrain. But we all know better. Every disappearance adds weight to the unspoken rules. Every story fuels the fear we try to push down with coffee and cold radio chatter. Those who didn't listen or thought they were invincible became the reason that rules got stricter, the night shifts more cautious. Sometimes the past creeps up in ways you can't shake. I remember sitting in the cruiser miles from the nearest town, hearing footsteps crunched behind me. No one there when I looked. Another night, a call came through, a voice begging for help, but the coordinates didn't exist. That's when it hits you. These aren't just stories, they're warnings. So the rules exist not just to keep us alive, but to protect what little sanity we have left when dealing with something that doesn't play by the rules at all. And one night, I came closer than I ever wanted to breaking one of those rules. It's a night I'll never forget. But before I get into that, I need to tell you about the night that changed everything for me. The night I almost crossed the line, and why that almost cost me everything. Asterisk, it was one of those nights where everything felt off from the moment I punched in. The air was thick, like the kind of humidity that sticks to your skin and makes your clothes cling. The radio was quiet to quiet, and the usual background noise of crickets and nightbirds was missing. I was driving down a long stretch of highway, lights barely cutting through the dense darkness, when the call came in. It was a distress call from a remote area just outside Shiprock, scared, begging for help. Begging for help. Most nights who roll towards those calls with caution, but this one felt different. There was something in the voice, a crack in the panic that didn't sit right with me. I wasn't supposed to be alone on this shift, but my partner had called out sick. So I grabbed my gear and headed out, telling myself to keep it tight. Keep it quick. But when I got near the coordinates, there was nothing. No sign of a person, no car, no tracks. Just silence and the feeling that I wasn't alone. Then I heard a faint rustle behind my cruiser. I turned, expecting maybe a coyote or a stray dog, but nothing was there. And then, right on the edge of my headlights, I saw a figure standing still, too still. My heart slammed in my chest as the rules I'd been told raced through my mind. Don't stop. Don't respond. But instinct pulled me to reach for the door handle. That's when I felt it, a cold pressure, like ice sliding down my spine, and the unmistakable sensation that something was watching, waiting. I slammed the door shut, started the engine, and got out of there as fast as I could. That night taught me just how thin the line is between staying safe and crossing into something you can't come back from. But there was one rule, the one that saved me that night, the rule that every officer hopes they never have to test. Next, I'll tell you exactly what that rule is and why it matters more than anything else out here. Asterisk, that rule, the one that saved my skin that night, is simple but damn hard to follow when your adrenaline's spiking and your mind screaming. To react. It's the rule about never engaging with whatever's watching you, no matter how close it gets or how real it seems. If something's out there, lurking just beyond the headlights, don't acknowledge it. Don't look it dead in the eye. Don't let it know you see it. Because once it knows, you're no longer just a cop on patrollia, a target. That night, when I saw that figure standing still in the dark, my instincts begged me to stop, to get out, to check. But something deep inside told me to fight that urge. Instead of getting out, I kept my hands on the wheel, stared straight ahead, and rolled past. I didn't slow down, didn't flash my lights. I didn't give it a single chance to get closer. I drove fast, heart pounding, the figure fading behind me but never fully disappearing from the corners of my eyes. When I finally made it back to the station, the silence felt heavier, like the darkness had followed me halfway inside. I realized then just how fragile the boundary between safety and danger really is. That rule wasn't just about survival, it was about keeping your sanity when everything around you wants to pull you under. That's why we never forget it, and why officers who break it usually don't get a second chance. Some never come back, others come back broken, living proof of what happens when you engage what shouldn't be engaged. I wish I could say my story ended there, but there's one more cautionary tale about the officer who didn't listen. Up next, I'm gonna tell you what happened to him. It's short, but it's devastating, and it's a reminder that these rules aren't just stories. They're the line between life and death. There was an officer, a good guy, sharp and confident, who thought he was immune to the stories. Like a lot of us, he rolled his eyes at the warnings, chalked it up to old wives' tales and stress playing tricks on the mind. One night, he responded to a call-out near the outskirts of Shiprock. The details are hazy, but what we do know is that he broke the most important rule. He answered when something called his name. After that, he vanished. No trace, no radio chatter, nothing. The search teams scoured the area for days, but it was like he evaporated into thin air. Weeks later, his cruiser was found abandoned on a deserted road, engine running. Lights on. Doors wide open, but he was nowhere to be seen. The guys who found the cruiser said the air felt wrong around the spot. Heavy, silent, like time had stopped. The official story was he got lost or had an accident, but everyone in the department knew better. The way those who went looking talked about the place. It was like they'd seen something they weren't meant to. That disappearance tightened. The grip of the unspoken rules. No more jokes. No more I don't believe it. It became clear that out here, you either respect the rules or you pay the price. Some officers come back, shaken. Some never come back at all. After what happened to him, the department locked down patrols during certain hours, started pairing up officers, and made sure that nobody went out alone after dark. They never talk about it openly, but the message is loud and clear. These rules keep you alive. Speaking of things we don't talk about openly, there are reports, or rather, things we don't report. Unexplained cases that never make it into official records. Because some truths are too dangerous to document. I'll get into why we never file certain reports next. Asterisk. There's stuff that happens out here that doesn't get written down, not because someone forgot or was lazy, but because some things are better left off the record. When you work nights, in Shiprock you see cases that defy explanation. Calls that come through with no location, people who disappear without a trace, footprints that lead into thin air. Some things just don't make sense, and the department knows that filing them officially only draws unwanted attention. Officers are told to handle these quietly. Take care of it internally, they say. Sometimes that means writing vague reports. Other times it means never mentioning the incident again. The fewer questions asked, the better. It's like there's a line you don't cross, a limit to what can be documented without stirring up something worse. And honestly, the more you hear about these unexplained cases, the more you realize that silence is survival. The last thing anyone wants is for someone curious to go digging too deep. Because when you pull back the curtain, you're not just exposing strange events, you're inviting something dark to notice you. I remember one case where a local reported hearing voices outside their window for nights on end. Voices calling, names and whispering secrets no one should know. The officer sent to check found nothing, but the family refused to speak about it afterward. That report, it never made it to the official files. These are the kinds of incidents that feed the fear, running through every patrol after dark. And that fear is why there's one last rule, one the elders only share after you've survived the worst of it. The rule that keeps officers alive long enough to tell the tale. Next, I'm going to tell you about the rule they only tell you after you survives, the one that's buried deep in tradition, and for good reason, Asterisk the last rule, the one they only share with you after you've seen enough. After you've survived the nights when everything almost went sideways, is like a secret passed down through whispers and knowing glances. It's less about what to do and more about what not to do. They tell you to keep your pride in check, to respect the land and the silence, and most importantly, never try to challenge whatever's out there. You see, out here, there's a kind of balance, fragile and ancient. The elders talk about it in stories, how the spirits of this land don't want to harm us if we don't provoke them, but they will test you. They'll push your limits, make you question what's real, and if you try to prove you're stronger or smarter or braver, that's when things get ugly. The rule is simple. Don't chase after the unknown. Don't try to confront it, to shine a light on it, or to call it out. Because whatever it is, it feeds on fear, doubt, and the desperation to be heard or seen. The more you give it, the more it grows. And once it's grown, it's a lot harder. To keep your sanity, your life. I've heard stories of officers who thought they could outsmart the dark, who followed strange sounds or chased fleeting shadows. They came back broken or didn't come back at all. Those experiences shaped the final rule, one that's never printed or spoken outside of trusted circles. After you survive, they tell you, leave the night to the night, respect the land, follow the rules. It's not just about staying alive. It's about knowing your place in something much bigger and darker than any of us can fully understand. Now, if you're thinking of visiting Shiprock, especially after dark, you need to hear this. Next part. It's a warning for anyone who isn't from here, but might find themselves wandering these roads when the sun goes down. Asterisk, look, I get it, Shiprock's got this raw, haunting beauty that pulls people in. You hear the stories, see the pictures, and maybe you think it's just another spot to explore. But if you're thinking about coming here, especially after dark, you've got to take this seriously. This isn't a tourist trap or a weekend getaway. It's a place where the rules aren't written down, but they're as real as the desert air. If you're not from around here, if you don't know the land like we do, you're walking into something you don't fully understand. The nights aren't just dark, they're alive, and they watch you. You don't answer voices calling your name. You don't stop for shapes that look human but move like shadows. You don't wander off the beaten path, chasing curiosity. Some folks get drawn in by the mystery, the thrill. But out here, that thrill can turn fast into something else, something dangerous. The land doesn't take kindly to disrespect, and neither do the things that live in the dark. People who ignore the warnings, who think they can outsmart whatever's out there, they don't get lucky twice. So, if you find yourself in Shiprock when the sun sets, keep your head down, follow the local advice, and remember some rules are made for a reason. It's not just about fear, it's about survival. The last thing anyone wants is for a visitor to become another story, whispered about in the dead of night. Now that you know what it's like out here, and the warnings that come with it, Eva, I've got one last thing to share. A confession, really. Something that's been weighing on me ever since I started speaking out about all this. Because no matter how many rules we follow, some questions never go away. Asterisk, there's something I've been holding back for a long time, something that's hard to say out loud. Even now, after all these years on the job, after all the nights spent staring into the darkness, I still can't shake this feeling. Some things out here don't want to be understood, and maybe they never will be. I've seen too much, heard too much, and sometimes I wonder if the land itself is trying to warn me, or maybe warn all of us to stop digging. I've asked myself why I'm finally breaking the silence, sharing these stories with you. Maybe it's because I can't carry the weight alone anymore. Or maybe it's because I want others to be ready to listen and believe before it's too late. There are nights when I still hear whispers or catch glimpses of shapes just beyond my vision. And I know the rules aren't just stories, they're survival tools. But here's the hardest truth. Sometimes, even when you follow every rule, the night still reaches out. You can do everything right and still feel that cold breath on the back of your neck. That's the part no one talks about. The part where fear becomes a permanent shadow, following you long after the shift ends. I don't have all the answers, and maybe I never will. But if you take one thing from what I've said, let it be this: respect the land, respect the silence, and never ignore the warnings. Because out here, in Shiprock after dark, some names are better left unspoken. And if you ever hear your name called when the world's asleep, just don't answer. That's where this story ends. Or maybe it's just the beginning. Asterisk. So here we are, at the edge of this story, and I want you to hold on to this last thought. It's the kind of line you don't forget, the kind that sticks with you long after the lights go out. Because if there's one thing that's crystal clear after all these years, it's this: if you hear your name called out after midnight, no matter how familiar that voice sounds, no matter how desperate or gentle it ain't for you, I've seen what happens to those who answer. It's like stepping through a door that slams shut behind you, cutting off any chance of turning back. And once that door's closed, you're not just lost in the night, you're lost in something far worse. The darkness around Shiprock holds secrets older than any of us. It waits patiently, watching, listening. It knows when you're afraid and when you're curious, but it respects one thing above all else: the silence. So when you hear that call, when the quiet shifts and suddenly feels alive, remember this story. Remember the rules, the warnings, and the faces of those who didn't make it back. Because out here, in these forgotten roads and empty fields, sometimes the scariest thing isn't what you see but what you don't. That's the story I needed to tell. And if you've got the guts to keep listening, there are plenty more out there waiting to be heard. But for now, just remember, if you hear your name after midnight, don't answer. Asterisk, if you're still here, listening, then listen close, because this is the last thing you need to remember. Out in Shiprock, when the clock strikes midnight and the world goes silent, some voices slip through the darkness, calling your name. They sound real, too real. But whatever you do, don't answer. Don't even think about it. Because once you do, you cross a line that might never let you come back. So here's the last warning from me to you. If you hear your name called after midnight, just stay quiet, keep driving, and don't look back.